Okay. So as promised today, the point of this breakout is to get you comfortable moving data around inside of a React app. And the basic principle that we want to work with is called actions up, data down. That's the basic principle. And what that means is that we talked this morning about when we pass props, those are passed down from the parent. So those are our data changes. So when we pass new props, it's because we have new data. So data goes down from the top down. But quite often what we're going to need is inside one of the inner components, we need to make a data change. We can dress you up, but we can't take you anywhere. Quite often in one of our inner components, we need to interact, whether it's a form field or a button or something that needs to happen that's going to cause a change in state for the entire application. So us taking that action there, the action goes up and changes the state, and then the new data comes down. So we're going to build today what I have decided to affectionately name a POS. So it's a point of sale system. I'll let you figure out what the other acronym stands for. But the basic idea is that we're going to have these two columns, and this will list where the item name and the price are. That will list the items that we can buy in our store. And when we click on them, it will add the price to the subtotal. And then we can check out at the end, and that will clear our cart. We could even have over here like the number of items in our cart or something like that to be able to show that. But this gives us a basic example that we can build in about an hour, and will take us through what we're going to need to show and how this would work in React to be able to have data coming down from our main app component into these subcomponents, taking action on them, changes the state, and the data comes back down. Make sense? Any questions before we get started? Awesome. I have taken the liberty of firing up Create React App. It's nice, it's straightforward, it's basic, and Webpack is already configured. So that makes it easy. So it gives me an app.js main component that I can start with, and we're going to start from there after we do a quick little bit of pseudocoding. So, based on looking at this and what you know of React so far, and let's go ahead and assume that we're going to have over here cart and like, a number for how many items are in the cart. Let's assume we're going to do that. How many components do you see that we're going to need? Closer. Which four? Nope. Closer. We could do this with actually up to like 7 different components if we really wanted to get fancy with it. But at a basic level, this gray box over here on the left-hand side is one component that is a container. It's going to contain menu items. So I need a container, like a menu item container, and a menu item component. Then I'm going to need a sidebar container. And in that sidebar, I'm probably going to need a subtotal component. I could do it as a subtotal component and a cart number component, or I could just pass data into the sidebar. And definitely I'm going to need a checkout button. So let's go for menu item container, menu item, sidebar, and checkout button. So yeah, we'll do it with 4 and 5 technically because there's app which is the overall component that wraps all of it. So 5 components that we're going to need. So with that in mind, let's get this big enough so that people can see it. Can you see that, Eric? Good, you're now my litmus test. So if you miss something, it's all on you. Cool. So this is the basic package structure that I get, and everything is in SRC. When I look at the basic app component that I get, it's basically it's just showing a header and an image and saying you can edit this, and it links to reactjs.org. So I'm going to get rid of all of that because we don't need it. Now we just have an empty component, and this auto restarts, so it looks like that. Yay. Good start. Let's make some new components. Don't need the logo, and don't really need the CSS. So that's my new basic app.js, and I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to save this as menu item container.js, and I'll go back and change the names of all of these. Save src menu item.js, sidebar.js, and checkout button.js. Those are the ones that we said we were going to have. So let's go back to app.js. So based on our wireframe, what do we need to require in, like, what components do we need to import into app? That's one. Sidebar. That's it. Because menu item will be imported into menu item container, and the checkout button will be imported into the sidebar. So actually, I'm already in the source directory. And in here, at a basic level, I just need these to show up. How they get styled and all that, we'll fix all that later. Right now, I'm more worried about data than anything else. I'll save this, then my app's going to break. And we'll watch it do that in just a sec. But because I haven't actually named those things in those component files, so let's do that. There's that, and we also know that in the menu item, or in the container, we need to import the menu item. And in the sidebar, we need to import the checkout button. Oops. Okay. Oops, that was bad. I got it aggressive. I got really aggressive. That's the sidebar. Don't need to import anything here. We just need to change the name. Okay, so now we have the base shape of all of our components put together, which is good. And our app still doesn't look like anything because we haven't styled anything yet. So let's do just like this much of this just so that we can see boxes, if nothing else. We'll come back here and actually we'll re-import the app.css, and then we'll just modify that. Don't need that stuff. Don't need that stuff. Okay. So we'll give it an ID of container because it's the menu item container, and we'll say the width is like 70%, and we'll give it a black border just so we can see it. Why not? We'll round the borders because, and 20 pixels of padding. That sounds good. And the sidebar, we'll float that one left. We'll do overflow auto here, and we'll float this one to the right. The width on this one will be 25%. That one will also have a black border. This would be so much easier with Sass. It's when you do stuff like this that you really appreciate Sass all of a sudden. And while I'm here, there we go. We'll have a button class that'll be a nice green checkout button. We'll start with that. And we don't have anything labeled yet, so we will there's our menu item container. Ta-da, container. And there's our sidebar. Yay. It's a beautiful app, wins design awards all over the place. Cool. So this gives us something very basic that we can start with. And now we need to think about where our data lives. And in this case, our data is going to live in our app component, in the overall parent. So we're going to have state. And we're going to have menu, which is going to be an array of all the items that we're going to sell. So we're going to need a name and a price for all the items. Sounds good? How about hot dogs? Price, $1. And then we'll have poke bowls. Why not? Price, those are expensive, apparently. And then we're going to have burritos. Those aren't terrible, but they're not great. And one more, sushi, of course. And it's cheap. We'll go with that. There's our menu. So now we have state for our entire application. There's one more thing we need for state. We need cart. Because we don't have we're going to need to keep track of what we've ordered each time. Okay. So now we have some state. So if I'm going to render the menu item container, I need to pass my items into that. So the data goes down. So in my menu item container, I now know I'm going to have this.props.items. And so in here, what I need to do is this.props.items.map. There we go. And what I'm going to do with each item is I'm going to create a menu item with that. I'm going to render my menu items. And I forgot to redo this one. So inside here, we're going to have this.props.name and this.props.price. And we're going to get one of these for each menu item that we have in our state, app state, passed down to our menu item container as a prop. So now we need a way to show this. And probably the easiest thing to do is to just turn this into a paragraph. And I'll do a span and say this.props.name. I'll show you why I'm doing a span in just a sec. $ this.props.price. Make sense? Because then what I can do is come in here and do that. And that will give my name a nice big block and push the price off to the side, and it'll be all my prices will be aligned down the right-hand side. Expected an assignment or function call and instead saw an expression on line 9 of menu item container. Cool. Oh, that's because I did that. There we go. That looks pretty good. And so now I have my items. I can blow this up a bit. Not too much. Yeah, so I have my items, I have my prices being passed down. And so now I need to think about what goes in my right-hand side, in my sidebar. So in my sidebar, I'm going to have an H2, which is going to have my subtotal, and this .props.subtotal. And I'm going to have an H4 that's going to have my cart and this .props.cart size, sure. And then I'm going to have my checkout button that's going to be there. Cool. Now let's actually make the checkout button look like something by having it actually be, do I name it button or BTN? Thank you. Thank you. I got so hung up on the other thing. Nope. Yes. So, again, totally winning design awards all over the place. But we have a problem with our data right now. What is it? Nope, that's not the problem. What's missing? Well, interactions are separate. Data. I have a data problem right now. What's missing? Subtotal and number of items in my cart, because just loading up the page, my subtotal should be 0, and I should have 0 items in my cart because I haven't clicked anything. So, if we think about this, these are things that would get passed into my sidebar. And we said that they are props.subtotal and props.cart size. So, and cart size equals this dot state dot cart dot length is a function on purpose because I need to calculate that. And the return value of that is what will get passed as a prop. And so what I need to do now is I have to think about how this is going to work. When I push things into my cart, am I going to push just the price? Am I going to push the whole object? Am I going to push the name? And how am I going to push that in there? Really, when it comes to the purposes of this app, I only really care about the price. So I can set up that when I click on one of the menu items, the price goes into the cart. So that means I get to return this .cart.reduce, and I can have the subtotal and the item, and subtotal plus item, and we'll start out at 0. Because if it's just an array of numbers, then I can just squish them all down into a single thing. So what I should see now is an error. Cannot read property reduce of undefined, right, because it is that, and ta-da. Native. So now I have an app that now the data is at least sane. We can test out if it works, because we can come up here and we can add like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you do the math, that's $20, and there's 5 items in the cart. So that part works. So what we can do to start off with is we can make the checkout behavior first. And this will give us our first action up and data down. So if I'm checking out, given the way that my data is stored, what do I need to do? What do I need to change about my app state to check out? I don't need to push anything to my cart, it's already there. I'll get that by clicking on menu items. So that's already there. In fact, checking out needs to be the exact opposite of that. I need to clear the cart. So checking out is clearing my cart because that's theoretically me giving money to the whoever and they're giving me my pile of food. So here's the big rule that we have to follow. The method to make a change has to be on the same component where the data is that you need to make a change. So if my cart and my state are on my app component, then I have to put the method here and pass that method down to the checkout button so that when I click on the checkout button, it runs that method here, changes my cart, and then the data goes back down. So I'm going to make a method called clear. Well, actually, let's just call it checkout because that's what we're doing. And what checkout needs to do is this.setState. Cart is an empty array. We're just going to wipe out whatever's in the cart. That's our checkout process. And now that I have this, my button is in my sidebar. So I need to pass this function to my sidebar so that sidebar can pass it to the checkout button. And it's a reference to the function. So I'm not running the function here. Here I wanted to run the function because I needed the result of that reduce. Here I don't want to run this function yet, otherwise my cart would be eternally empty no matter what I did. I want a reference to that function. Then I'm going to go into my sidebar. And I'm going to call it the handler because it's going to be the actual click handler. This dot props dot checkout. Same function. Just that's how I have to reference it here because it's being passed as a prop. So when I click on the button, it's going to run the handler method that was passed into this button. The handler method is the checkout method that I got passed into the sidebar, which is defined here in my app.js, and its job is to change the state on the app container. Because if we know that the subtotal is being calculated based on the numbers in the cart, and the cart size is being calculated based on the number of items in the cart, then if I clear the cart, my subtotal in my carts goes back to 0. Everybody follow? Now let's see if it works. No, it didn't. Why? I forgot to bind it. That's entirely what happened. So this dot checkout equals this dot checkout dot bind this. Boom. And so now it doesn't matter what's in my app.js file. In memory, the React app that's running has nothing in the cart. And in fact, I can confirm that. If I go to my React tools, and if you don't have the React Dev Tools installed from the Chrome store, go do that immediately after lecture. Because I'm able to connect to my app component, and over there on the right-hand side, you can see that there are no props that went in. My cart is an array of 0, and my menu is an array of 4 things. So I can see the state of my app, see the state of my React components by using these dev tools. Pretty awesome. So yeah, Ben. The reason I didn't call the function checkout. Do you mean when I passed it to the sidebar or when I passed it to the button, or when? Okay, because I only want that function to be run when the button is clicked on. So I'm just passing a reference to the function everywhere. Because if I run the function, it empties my cart.
So at the very last stage of the checkout,
On the checkout button itself.
because you put
On click, yeah.
click, that will, yeah.
That runs the function, yes. Yeah. When, okay, so I'll answer that question just by stating it again. When I click on it, that is the callback function that is registered to happen in response to that event. So JavaScript, the browser by default, is going to run that function in response to that event happening. So it's registered as a callback at that point. Cool? Yeah, no worries. So there we go. The action went up to the app.js component, and then the data came back down. So now all we need to do is go to the other side and make it so that when we click on one of these menu items, that adds the price to the cart. Make sense? Cool. So again, we're changing the state on the app. Therefore, the method that adds the item to the cart has to be on the app. Add to cart. And here, there's a couple different ways I can do this. So this dot set state, and I'm changing my cart, and here is where we get into one of the common danger points with state and arrays. Why do I not want to do this dot state dot cart dot push? Okay, other than KV, why do I not want to do this dot state dot cart dot push? Benji? Bingo. Second platter of cookies for you. Yes, I would be directly modifying the state at that point. So instead of using dot push, I want to use dot concat, because dot concat is going to return to me a new array that I can then set in state. So this dot state dot cart dot concat, and then here's where things get interesting. I have to figure out how I'm going to pass the data in to get the price. And there's about half a dozen different ways for me to do this. Some of them are better than others. If you were following the conversation, the big thread that happened yesterday about the click handlers and why it's generally a bad idea to use fat arrow functions in click handlers, that's one way we could address this. We could simply have a price param here and have that get pushed that way. We'll follow this path out, and we'll talk about the pros and the cons of it. So this is going to go, oh, I need to bind it. Thank you, Sebastian. I heard you thinking it really loud. So this is going to go on the menu item container. And again, I'm not running the function here. I just want the reference to it. And then in the menu item container, bless you. Again, I'm just going to name it handler because it's a click handler. It's a convenient name. Still not running the function because I still want to wait for that click to happen for it to work. And here, There's a couple different places I can put the onClick. I can put it on the P, I can put it on the name, I can put it on the price. P kind of sounds like the best because it's the, the overall line item. So onClick equals this.props.handler. The problem is that doesn't actually give me the price. So what I have to do here is make a fat arrow function that is going to run that. Make sense? So I'm creating a new function definition that will be run every time this gets clicked on. The downside to this, and what the conversation in that thread was about, and there are good points on both sides, is that every time this component gets re-rendered, I'm creating a new function in memory. I'm defining a new click handler function. And depending on how the garbage collection process goes that deletes the old references and old objects and old functions that were defined, I could end up having a bit of a memory leak and just using up extra memory that I didn't need. If it's something like this where the menu items don't change and they're relatively static, you're not generally going to run into a performance problem at all, and this is relatively safe. If it is something where you're going to be re-rendering a lot, like for example something that was in our sidebar, we wouldn't want to do this over there because that is going to be a genuine performance problem. Even if you've got like a gazillion gigs of RAM in your machine and the latest CPU and all that, then you're going to run into a little bit more over time. If you leave the app open for days and days at a time and re-render about 86 million times, you will notice a slowdown in performance, and you will see Chrome's memory usage start to creep up, and you will never ever blame the content in the tabs you have open, and you will always go on Twitter and talk about how Chrome is a memory hog. But it's the code you're running, not the browser that's running it. So those are the pros and cons of using this particular method. The other thing that we could do is we could use HTML5 data attributes. So what we could do is we could set a data attribute on the P that was the price, and then we could grab the event object from the click handler and grab the attribute from e.target of data-price. And then we'd just be able to access that data that way, which is actually, we'd only have to write one function for that instead of this wrapped inside of a fat arrow function. So that's the other way that we could address this problem. But this should work. Yeah? Could I make a state inside of this menu item? Absolutely I could. Mm-hmm. Okay. So awesome idea. I see what you're saying. The one challenge with that is then I'm basically setting the state of this object based on the props that are passed in. Right. So when I'm the thing is, state should be encapsulated inside the object. State shouldn't be modified by props that come in from outside. Props modify the behavior of the component. State is the current state of it based on what the interactions have been and things like that. So there's you want to have as closely dotted of a line as possible between them. There, as with any rule, there's exceptions. There are cases where the state might change depending on the props that come in, but that's typically where you would actually have a function that you would run that would evaluate the props that get passed in and then use that to change the state. Another layer, yeah. As opposed to just doing a constructor and this.state and key is this.props.something and this is this.props.something. A, it's duplicating data, and B, it's not separating out the inner data state from the outer data that's coming in. And you're basically just finding a way to make your immutable data mutable. Yeah, I would use a data attribute for this, honestly. Yeah, that's the most scalable, because then that way if my menu item, if I end up having 10,000 things in my menu, I haven't just registered 10,000 functions in memory, extra functions. I only have one. I happen to have a whole bunch of copies, pointing to it saying, hey, this is the function you're going to run, but that's just registering the callback handler. I'm only ever defining one function at that point. So, but we'll try it with this way first, and then we'll show the other way just for demonstration purposes. Okay, last thing I'm going to do. Well, actually, they're all P's, so it's going to be easy. Is I'm going to make a rule for P's. So that way we can see that they're clickable when I put my mouse on top of them. In fact, let's do a little bit better than that. There. Cool. Ooh, okay. Now, theoretically, let's go ahead and check out so we clear our cart. So we're starting with 0. So theoretically, if I click on this, my subtotal should be $1 and my cart should be 1. Yay, worked. And this one, 2 items in my cart, it's now $46, which is just like going to Pokerito. 58 and 63. Cool. And then I can check out my cart and I can start all over again, and it works. And so again, we've passed down this click handler to the menu item itself. And then when we clicked on it, that action went all the way back up to app.js. That's where the state was that we needed to modify. So that's where the function ran. We bound it properly, so it was able to use this.setState, and it was able to add something to the cart. Any questions about how we got to this point? No. Cool. So what I'll do now is I will just leave that one there as a commented out version. And stop prop, stop price. On click equals this.props.handler. So there's that. And then what we change so just to make it nice and easy, I will say e.target just to keep myself from having to write extra lines. Cart, this.state.cart.concat, and what I'm going to do is grab l.adder data price. So I grab the attribute from the value of the attribute from that. Ooh, there's a gotcha. Let me do this. Data attributes are always stored as strings. That was really close to me flaming out right in front of you. There we go. And yes, that could have been e.target.adder data price. I'm just breaking it out for clarity's sake. Let's see if this works now. In fact, let's start off with an empty cart. Okay. Womp womp. Cool. Wasn't supposed to do that. Oh, it's because I clicked on this, and so it dumped it into my editor. el.adder. Is it getAdder? Yeah, it's probably getAdder. Or is it getAttribute? Let's try getAttribute. I haven't had to write this method in a while. When in doubt, read the frickin' directions. Yes, it's getAttribute. Okay, we'll use that one. There we go. So arguably, my method needs more code, but like I said, it keeps you from having to define a whole bunch of functions, especially if you end up with a large set of menu items. Think about listing all the users on, something that's got like 150 users, and each one has a click handler on it. You just defined 150 functions in memory. So it's a scalability concern more than anything else. Yeah, Alethea. Right.
So could you go over, like, where does the array get reused?
So this .setState works like a patch HTTP request. We're going to show it what needs to be modified in the state. And it's using object.assign is the way it's working under the hood. So object.assign lets me have an object like this, and then I can do, I will always start with an empty object, and then I'll take my thing, and then I'm going to add, say, this to it. And that would give me a new thing that had keys of A, C, and E, and values of B, D, and F. So that's if the key doesn't exist already. But the other thing I can do is with object.assign, I can do this, and if the key already exists, it resets the value to the new one. So it kind of merges the objects in that case. So that's what this .setState does behind the scenes to be able to update what the state is. But this .setState as a function is also doing all the other things to trigger the lifecycle methods like should component update, component will update, component did update with a render in between. So that's all the other things that this .setState is doing. But in order to manage the data, it's using object.assign to effectively merge the object I give it with what the existing state is. And so when that happens, what I'm doing is I'm giving it the key of cart, which exists in the state, and I'm giving a new value there that is a new array. I'm taking the value of the existing this.state.cart, and by calling .concat on that array, I'm getting back a brand new array that is all of the things from this.state.cart and whatever I passed as the arguments to concat. No, this.setState does that for me behind the scenes. I'm just passing it the data that I want it to put into the state. And then because it triggers the render and everything else, that's what causes the rest of my app to recognize that what's in this.state.cart is now different. Make sense? Cool. Questions? Why is it working?
Yeah,
Oh, it's because of what push returns. What does push return? An array. It returns the new array after pushing the item into it. So what happened is you directly modified state. .push as a JavaScript function returns the new array, the reset array with the new value added into it. So then when you ran this .set state, it took that new array and made that the new value in state. So it basically properly did the data overwriting that you did forcefully right beforehand. So it worked with push, don't do it. Yeah. Don't continue to do that. Maybe go back and change that code, just saying. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, this is obviously a very quick and dirty example, but it demonstrates actions up, data down, and allows us to see how this data flow can move between, we can move data between different components and have something we do over here affect something, theoretically somewhere else in our app. So the other cool thing about the Create React app is it already turns this into a repo for me, so all I have to do is push it up to GitHub so you guys can see it. So I'll get busy on that. Let me check in with, I forgot to check in with Calgary. I am a terrible person.
Stop the lecture.
Cool.
Did you say that push returns an array?
I think so.
It returns the length.
It returns what?
The length.
Oh, oops. Yeah.
Mystery as to why they're out there.
That is actually a genuine mystery. Not anytime soon.
The data attributes, so you
Yeah.
attach the function to the data attribute.
Yeah.
And then that prevents you from having to attach to every single child in that HTML.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is, I'm still binding like that reference to the function as a click handler, but that's still just one function definition,
Okay.
and not having to create a new fat arrow function for every element.
You know, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And there's circumstances where it would be not totally simple.
Not totally. Like I said, if you have,
Like a static function.
yeah, if you have a static function, like especially if you're just doing, like a functional component kind of thing, then it's not the worst. Because if that's not going to get re-rendered a lot, then it's totally fine. It's when it gets re-rendered, especially on like mobile devices and stuff like that, where memory management is.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, like, no, I mean,
Yeah.
not